Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. It's a big day for our ladies in class today because the 19th Amendment is going to finally get passed. Now, the women's suffrage movement, and remember that suffrage means the right to vote. The women's suffrage movement has been building since the 1840s and most likely before that. Now, put this into perspective, everyone. When the country begins, white, land owning men are able to vote. Within the next couple of decades, white men, whether you own property or not, are able to vote. Fast forward a few more decades and a civil war fought over slavery, and men, black men, who were recently not even considered human beings, got the right to vote. Fast forward a few more decades after that, and immigrants coming off boats with diseases, no money, no prospects, no future, not even able to speak the language, don't know what democracy and freedom even are, they were able to vote upon setting foot on American soil. And if we want to say that the country started in 1790, that is going to be what, 130 years before women are finally able to get the right to vote. So I think we could all admit that baked into the DNA of American or America is the idea that women are not equal to men. Now, things have changed. Progress has been made. More progress is to come, I would imagine. Now, this is going to dramatically change the landscape of politics in America if you think about it, because you now doubled your voting population while bringing women into the fold. So now politicians can no longer pander just to men and what men want. They also have to think about what women want if they're going to ask for their vote. Now, the women's suffrage movement kind of takes a hit in the lead up to the World War I because women tend to be more on the pacifist side, meaning that they do not like war. Their husbands, their sons, their fathers go off and die, and they're left to, kind of handle everything on their own. The war does wind up saving them because they do step up to the plate, get involved, selling war bonds, organizing patriotic rallies, working in war production jobs. They prove by rolling up their sleeves that they can do exactly what men can do, that they're smart, that they're passionate, that they love their country, and that they do, in fact, deserve the right to vote. Now, one woman that I want to talk about is Alice Paul. She's part of this new wave of college educated women who wanted to use more militant tactics, meaning through threats of force if need be. So she is going to campaign vehemently against Woodrow Wilson, calling him the Kaiser, meaning the German dictator. She is likening our president to the German Kaiser, oppressing women and not giving them the right to vote. How is it okay to fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home to half your people? And I think we would all agree that that is a valid question to ask, especially when women are more and more proving that they're not just there to listen to their husbands and have children and be complacent, that they want a more of an active role in society and that they can actually do the same things that men can. Now, Paul and her friends are going to chain themselves to the White House fence. They're going to be thrown in prison. As a result, they're going to go on a hunger strike. Men, the guards there, are then going to start to force feed them. The press is going to pick this up and run with it and put a tremendous amount of pressure on Woodrow Wilson. He decides to switch tacks and says that we have made partners of women in this war, puts his weight behind the 19th Amendment, and in 1920 it is finally ratified. The U.S. is the 27th nation to allow women to vote. Keep that in mind. 27th nation. So we're the first republic with democratic elections and freedom for most men, opportunity for most people, but yet we're the 27th nation to actually allow women to vote. So congratulations, ladies. Here are some pictures of the women protesting outside of the White House. Here is a woman's march. I believe that's New York City. And that's Alice Paul. Now, prohibition, bad news. We have discussed from the very beginning. We had a whiskey rebellion in 1794. We had the Temperance Society of Women in the middle of the 1800s and late 1800s. Prohibition is the idea that alcohol is bad, okay? Men get abusive, they get lazy, they get sloppy. It takes away their work effort. There's also a religious component to this that that drinking was a sin against God because of the various negative ramifications that it had. And also keep in mind that the Protestants and the Catholics never really got along. The Catholics were looked at as Germans and Irish who were interested in drinking and bringing that culture over from Europe. They didn't like it here. The Protestant work ethic, like the Puritans, they did not like the idea of these people coming over and becoming drunk in our country. So, employers hope to have a more disciplined workforce. Urban reformers envision a more orderly city, less fighting, less abuse, undermining political machines. And that's an interesting point. The Tammany Halls of the world, they would go into the bars on election day in the Lower East Side and pull the Irish and the German immigrants out of it, drunk as all hell, to vote for their guys and vote more than once sometimes. Women hope to stop husbands from abusing them, financial problems, and the native-born seeing the imposing of American values by immigrants, which we just talked about. Now, the war helps as many breweries opened by German Americans. It becomes unpatriotic to drink beer because beer was tied to Germans. The Food Administration says that the grain should be used for the war effort and not for booze. That's interesting. December of 1917, the passage of the 18th Amendment prohibiting the manufacture and sale of intoxicating liquor, ratified by the states in 1919. So if you think about the 1830s and 40s, the Women's Temperance Society and the women's suffrage movement, two of the things they wanted was a curb of drinking and the right to vote. Well, they get them in almost the same year. Now, prohibition is going to be in effect until, I believe, 1933. It is often talked about that the rise of La Cosa Nostra, or what we know as the mafia today, existed or came to be as a result of bootlegging, which was the illegal sale of alcohol. You make something that is widely consumed illegal, that is going to drive the also, while limiting the supply of it, you are going to increase demand significantly. You limit supply, prices are going to go sky high. So those who are willing to take on risk are going to sell it, open up speakeasies, which are underground bars in various cities around the country. You're talking about Al Capone, you're talking about Lucky Luciano, okay? Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey was coming in from Europe into places like Montauk, where it was then ferried into the city. So Long Island does have a history of bootlegging in it because of our proximity to New York. Okay? And we know that Americans do not like their alcohol taken away from them. And this comes down to, should people be free? If they want to destroy themselves with alcohol, should they be allowed to do it without the government telling them what to do? And if you think about drugs today, we have certain drugs that are legal, certain drugs that are quasi-legal, certain drugs that are fully illegal. And a lot of people say, well, let them all be legal. If people want to take them and destroy themselves, let them go do it. And the other side of that is that, it's lawlessness, it's sinful, it hurts the economy, it rips apart families, it should be illegal, and people should either get help or be put in prison. So I have some pictures here for you of them emptying, I'm assuming that's either beer or whiskey, into the street. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. So that's women's temperance propaganda. We want beer, we want beer. Okay. All right, now the Espionage Act. If you guys remember back to John Adams, President number 2, and the Alien and Sedition Acts, the federal government enacted laws to restrict the freedom of speech. This Espionage Act in 1917 will be similar. It's wartime. The Wilson administration and the government in general does not want to be undermined by people that would be pushing against the war effort. So they prohibited spying and interfering with the draft, but also making false statements that might hurt the military. They need men to want to go to war, not to be reading the paper and hear that their government is sending them to death without a clear vision on what we are to gain in this war. In 1918, the Sedition Act makes it a crime to make spoken or printed statements that intended to cast contempt, scorn, or disrepute on the government and or intended to interfere with the war effort. All right? So, this is a violation of our foundational First Amendment right to have the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. This is the government saying, we are in a wartime, we are in a crisis, and you will not just say whatever you want, excuse me, to undermine our government during this all-important time. Now, that does make sense if you are in the government because you need to keep things under control while you have a war. But on the other hand, if our First Amendment rights are going out the window, I think a lot of people said, well, what's coming next? And if the war ends, will every government claim that there is some sort of security problem or wartime measure that starts to limit free speech? It's the slippery slope argument. Once you step onto that slope, how far are you going to slide down? Now, Americanization, there's a big push that if we are fighting a world war against some countries who have significant populations of recent immigrants in our country, they need to stop being Germans and they need to start being Americans. So Americanization is about building of patriotism, all right? The building of democracy and freedom and capitalism, all right? They need workers to work. They want people to salute the flag, sing the national anthem. Okay, so the melting pot theory is that newcomers were supposed to merge their identity into existing American nationality, and they're going to push this in the public schools big time. That is why we get up out of our chairs during homeroom and say the pledge. That started during this time period to build patriotism in kids. If you take the son of a German immigrant and teach him English, and to raise, put his hand over his heart when he says the pledge every day, will he be proud of his German heritage or will he be proud of his American heritage? All he knows is America. So they are trying to kind of socially engineer patriotism throughout our country during this war. This is some of the propaganda here for Americanization Day. So this is about coming to the public schools to learn English, many people's one language. The anti-German crusade. German Americans bear the brunt of these Americanization efforts. By 1914, we have 9 million German Americans in the United States. German culture is admired by many Americans. A quarter of American high school students were studying German. Germany was a proud country, okay? They look like Americans. They work hard, they build things, they know how to farm. The creation of kindergarten was their idea. But once the war starts, Germans are going to become a target. The hamburger becomes the Liberty sandwich, and sauerkraut becomes the Liberty cabbage. And if, I don't know, you guys are too young, but the Iraq War in 2003, the French would not support us. Americans got very, very upset, and they started calling French fries and French toast freedom fries and freedom toast. So, similar, then and now connection when time of war breaks out. Now, let's just do immigration quickly. If we're worried about foreigners, because we're in a war with some of these countries, and we're worried about Americanization efforts and patriotism, then there is going to be a move towards immigration restriction. Now remember, when I had you guys stand up in front of the class and talk about what a Northwestern European looks like versus a Southeastern European, that idea is going to hold even further. South and Eastern Europeans were less white. They were less interested in freedom and democracy. They were more interested in socialism and labor unrest and unionization and strikes and boycotts and all of these things that were considered to be anti-American. Okay? So there will be a move towards immigration restriction, and in the early 1920s, there is going to be federal legislation in putting quota systems in for how many people can come from each country. That is all for today. I will post this video now on Google Classroom. We will wrap this up tomorrow and Monday and take our test on Tuesday. And remember, you will have a DBQ due tomorrow that I will put up at 8 a.m. and it will be due by 5. Email me with any problems. I hope you're all doing well. I miss you, and I hope to see you guys soon.